So when we talk about the meaning of size, we're going to talk about both what's on our plate, so portion sizes versus serving sizes, and start to get into what we are told, at least in the US, about the appropriate body size for men and women. More to come on that in weeks to come. So let's start with food. So what's a serving? So if you remember from week 1, when we were reading a nutrition label, it said a serving size on those nutrition labels that you were analyzing. So a serving is a set standard unit of measurement or set amount of food. So things like bananas, Whole Foods don't often have a serving size on them because they don't come with a nutrition label. It's not required unless it's a processed or produced food that is packaged. So this is set by the USDA, and you get these recommendations through websites like myplate.com. So just to kind of give you an example, an 8-inch banana, which is kind of a standard size of a banana, equals 1 cup. And the average daily serving of fruit for an adult recommended by the USDA is 2 cups. So if you ate a banana, that's half of your fruit servings for the day if you follow the USDA MyPlate, which again, you know your body best. Some people do better with no fruit, some people do better with a lot of fruit, and some people do better with that, about 2 cups a day. So getting to know what your body likes best. Okay, so again, just a reminder from week 1, nutrition facts on that nutrition label, they're going to give you right at the top the serving size for that particular food. And so anything that you are, if you're calculating apps and you're trying to plug in what you ate, keep that in mind. So why does this matter? It matters particularly in the US because rarely do serving sizes equal portion sizes. So when you go out to eat at a restaurant, oftentimes you get a giant plate full of food. But that doesn't mean that what's on that plate is a serving of each of those foods. So what you eat in one sitting is considered a portion, and a portion may not be a serving. So when I was in college, grad school, ramen noodles were kind of common fare for me, even though I didn't really like them, and I knew they weren't great for me because they were cheap. And then later I realized that I was gluten intolerant, so now I don't eat really any noodles because I can't have wheat. But this comes as a surprise to a lot of students. So it's this tiny thing of ramen noodles that you've just spent, $1 or whatever on at the grocery store, and yet there are 2 servings of ramen noodles per container. So if you look at this, it says half of a block of noodles with seasoning. Servings per container 2. And so if you eat the whole thing, that's actually considered 2 servings per container. So here's a note, though, on packaged food servings. So they don't necessarily reflect the serving sizes outlined by the USDA. So for example, a serving of pasta, according to the package, is about like 2 ounces, 43 grams, 2 ounces-ish, uncooked. But then once you cook it, of course, that's going to plump up. So according to the USDA MyPlate, equivalents 2 ounces of uncooked pasta equals 2 servings of grains. And so again, if you're eating the whole thing, you may be eating a lot more than would be recommended for you if you were following the USDA. Or you may have a whole lot of servings of grains all in one fell swoop and eat all of your grains just with one thing of ramen noodles. So just things to keep in mind. Pay attention to the serving sizes. Pay attention to how much you're eating. If you're not trying to lose weight, this probably is less important to you. But if you are trying to eat healthier or lose weight, then it's really important to make sure that your portion size and your serving size, at least be knowledgeable about what you're eating, is what I'm trying to say. So buyer beware, the whole package is not 1 serving, it's actually 2. Okay, so bagels, really common grab and go food for college students, but when you think of what you're actually getting, what you're eating, the portion versus what actually is the USDA considers a serving, we have a problem. So this bagel is one portion. So if you eat the whole thing for breakfast, then that's considered a portion. It's what you eat in one sitting. A serving, however, is a set measurement. So the reality with this bagel is that you're actually eating 2 servings because the bagel is so big that it actually comprises 2 servings. So this is your kind of standard bagel size that you get if you go to Einstein's or Blue Sky Bagel downtown or wherever you might be going to get your bagels. The bagels that are the quote unquote correct serving size. So if you go to the grocery store and you're looking at bagels, they have these teeny tiny mini bagels. That is actually a serving. So half of what we usually think of a bagel is considered a standard serving. But again, the USDA recommends about 6 ounces of grains per day for the average adult who's on a 2,000 calorie diet. This bagel would be 4 ounces of those 6. And so it's 2 servings, but you've also eaten now 2/3 of your allotted servings of grains for the day if you're following that standard USDA food plate and the MyPlate guides. So again, just something to be aware of. So how do you know, right? Like you go to a restaurant, they put a bunch of food on your plate, and if you're trying to watch your portion sizes because you're trying to lose weight or be healthier or whatever you're trying to do, how do you know what various serving sizes actually are when something is dished out to you and you don't have control over it? So just kind of give you an idea, some really good visual aids. So a cup is about a baseball, 3/4 of a cup, a tennis ball, half a cup is a computer mouse, 1/4 cup is an egg, 3 ounces is a deck of cards, 2 teaspoons a ping pong ball. So when would you use these? So 2 teaspoons is typically a serving of like nut butter or regular butter. So kind of think about ping pong ball size. 3 ounces is your typical serving of meat. Deck of cards, think about if you go to a steakhouse, you're not going to get a 3-ounce steak. You're probably going to get, a 6, 8, 12, 16-ounce steak. 3 ounces is considered a standard serving of meat by the USDA. Grains often, if they're uncooked, it's a 1/4 cup of grains and then puffs up, of course, as you add water and cook it. Depending on what you're eating, but the banana was 1 cup, and that's half of your allotted serving size for, according to the USDA, for fruit. Grains, again, depending on what they are, if it's a cooked grain, depending on what the grain is, 3/4 of a cup of cooked grain might be a serving size, or it might be a cup, it might be half a cup. So again, just becoming knowledgeable about what you're eating, especially if you're trying to regulate weight or regulate certain kinds of foods that you're trying to eat less of or more of. Just some good visual aids that you can have in mind. So here we are. Let's go to a restaurant. So what you're served versus what actually is 1 serving. And so this is kind of your standard burger joint kind of place that you've gone to, and you're sitting down and you're getting served a meal. And you can see that what 1 serving, according to the USDA, versus 1 portion that you actually get at kind of any sort of fast food or even sit-down burger joint look very different. So you've lost half your burger if you're only eating a serving. You've lost 1 pickle. You've lost even some of the lettuce. You've lost a lot of the, at least half of the grain, I guess. You've lost, they cut that in half. You lost about 1/3, maybe 2/3 of your French fries. You've lost a lot of fries, and you lost a lot of ketchup. So just, again, to just educate you on what you're served, portion, versus what the USDA considers 1 serving of foods can be very, very different. And so one of the things we'll talk about as we go further into this class and get into the section on dieting and obesity is that we live in what's called an obesogenic environment, meaning that when we go out to eat, the setting promotes overeating because they give us a lot more than we actually might want to be eating for that given meal. We don't get a serving, we get 2 to 3 servings of a particular food when we go out to eat. So again, just things to be aware of. So give you an idea. We'll talk more about this as we go through the course. So one of the things that started happening in the 1970s was that the dinner size of our dinner plates started to increase. And so if you have a full set of kind of all of your cutlery and your plates and all of that stuff, the size of a dinner plate used to be more along the lines of what we consider a dessert plate, and that gradually increased over time. And so now our standard dinner plate is more like 10 to 12 inches, and it used to be like more like 7, 8 inches across. And so obviously if we're filling our plate, we're going to eat more because our plate sizes have increased. So our portion sizes have increased. Just again to kind of give you an idea of what's happened over time. So in the 50s, a burger at Burger King used to actually be a serving, and now it's not. So it's gotten quite a bit larger. The Happy Meal French fry, if you have kids at McDonald's, the Happy Meal French fry is actually a serving of fries versus what you would get if you bought fries as an adult. It's going to be a lot more than that, about 3 times the amount. Chocolate bars. 2 ounces of chocolate is considered a serving. We rarely eat 2 ounces of chocolate, and so the candy industry has really made bang for their buck by increasing the amount of chocolate or candy that you can get per package these days. But again, when you think about 2 ounces, which is a serving, versus 7 ounces, and this is the small Hershey bar, this is not like the big ones for Valentine's Day or any of the other holidays. Even Coke, movie popcorn, really, really increased our serving sizes. And so clearly, as we're eating more, obesity has become a larger problem in our nation. So going back to this idea of plate size, so kind of show you, so this is kind of the standard dinner plate. The large one on the left is kind of our standard dinner plate these days. Used to be a little bit closer to either the one on the far right or the one in the middle was the size of a standard plate. But just to give you an idea of the same amount of food, exact same serving on different plate sizes, right? On the one on the right, you feel like you're stuffed and you're eating maybe the whole amount, maybe even not the whole amount, and you feel like you got so much food. For the middle plate, it's like, there's a little bit of white around the edges, so you might eat it all because you feel like maybe you didn't get a full serving, even though that is one serving size of that particular dish. But with our standard dinner plate these days, you really kind of feel like you've been ripped off, because if you went to a restaurant and that was what you got, like, you probably would be like, hey, where's the rest of my food? Because you want to get what you paid for, and the fact that the plates are huge. And again, this is a standard dinner plate. Restaurant plates are often bigger than that. And they're giving you a ton of food. So just kind of FYI, this is called the Delboeuf illusion. And it's this notion that the same amount of food, the same serving of food, can look much smaller or much larger depending on plate size, and that then affects how much we actually eat. So the size of the plate matters when it comes to portion control, because we feel like we're going to eat all of what's on the plate if we feel like we're getting a small amount of food because the plate's a lot bigger than what we're served. We may not eat everything on our plate if we get the smallest plate because we feel like we got more than enough. So again, it's ways that we're tricking our brain, or our brain is tricking us in this case, Delboeuf illusion. So just to give you an idea of how plate size really matters. So again, just to kind of give you an idea, from the 1900s, the dinner plate size has increased from the standard of, it was smaller in the earlier 1900s. In the 70s, it was about 9 to 10 inches. Now it's more like 11 to 12 inches. And of course, portion sizes are going to go up as plate sizes go up. So the interesting thing is that as plate sizes have gone up, what we've been told by the media of what we should look like has actually gone down, right? So in the Eleanor Roosevelt, in the top left corner, that's the late 1800s, that was the ideal female figure. We would consider her overweight, actually, by today's standards. Then we had kind of the 1920s, which is the flapper there in the left bottom corner. So women were very, very thin. We started wearing corsets to try to make our breast and waist and hips look smaller and more manly. In the 50s, we kind of jump up to Jane Mansfield, 30s, 40s, 50s. Jane Mansfield, again, the curves are back. She would be considered kind of an average woman at that time, a very desirable figure. Marilyn Monroe, then, of course, in the 50s and the 60s, was the female icon. And again, Marilyn Monroe, by today's standards, would probably be considered overweight for a female form because this is now what we're told, right? Women are supposed to be lean and they're supposed to be toned. So we're supposed to have some definition in our arms. We're supposed to have those six-pack abs. And we're supposed to be thin, right? So you can have, we're not super, super skinny like the flappers. Definitely can have some muscle definition, should, according to the media, have some muscle definition, but you want to be lean and toned. Ditto for men. So men have been affected as well. So again, late 1800s, early 1900s, we were much more of an agrarian society. And so men worked in the field. So they were not, they weren't overweight. They were usually thin, but kind of strappy because they were working in the field. And so they had some muscle mass, but not huge muscle mass. Then we moved into the 40s and the 50s. This is actually a basketball team from the 40s, pictured on the right side there. Again, men were thin, but maybe a little bit of muscle tone because they were supposed to be thin and kind of leisure activity, slight activities there. And then we have today. So in the 80s and 90s, men were really, really told to bulk up. In the 2000s, that kind of still we want some muscle definition on men according to the media, but kind of, again, it's that kind of lean and toned look. So more to come on that as we move into media influence next.